Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, who appeared to us in the person of Master W. Fard Muhammad in July of 1930. We thank him for his coming and for raising from among us the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, who is now the exalted Christ. And we further bear witness that the two of them have left in our midst a man who is the embodiment of the spirit of truth. He is a divine teacher, leader, and guide, and a warner to America and the nations of the earth, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. It is in their names that we greet you in the greeting words of peace. Assalamu alaikum. Happy Savior's Day. Welcome to our plenary entitled The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam versus the ADL and the Simon Wiesenthal Center. Destroying the false charge of anti-Semitism is the basis of our conversation today. I am your host, Brother Daniel, out of Mosque Mariam here, well, not here, but in Chicago, Illinois, Mosque number 2. And I'm joined by our co-host for this event, Sister Sadia Kareem.
Assalamu alaikum, family. Hold on one second. Can y'all hear me? There we go. We got sound. So I am Sister Sadia Kareem from Mosque 45 in Houston, Texas, and I am honored to co-host this plenary meeting with Brother Daniel on this very important plenary on the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam versus the Anti-Defamation League and the Simon Wiesenthal Center, destroying the false charge of anti-Semitism.
Brothers and sisters, we know that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam have filed a monumental and historic lawsuit against the Anti-Defamation League and the Simon Wiesenthal Center. Today we are joined by 5 distinguished guests, who will take us deeper into the significance of this lawsuit in a legal sense, but also, of course, we must address the spiritual sense. So to my left, I have Brother Attorney Michael Muhammad. Can we give him a round of applause? We have Sister Judge Nichelle Muhammad. Give her a round of applause. We have Brother Student Minister Demetric Muhammad to my left right here. Give him a round of applause. And of course, these powerful members of our Shura Executive Council. I have Brother Student Minister General Counsel Arif Muhammad. And our National Secretary, Brother Saad Alim Muhammad.
So let's begin with our first question. So, Brother Demetric, we know that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam have never filed a suit like this, and everyone wants to know why now.
I think that's a wonderful question, and I think we have to first consider that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is a divine servant of Allah, and so he is divinely guided. And nothing that the minister has ever done, neither is this to be considered a contrivance, an artifice, or a ruse. We know that Allah guided the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan beginning in 1977 to stand to rebuild the work of his illustrious teacher, the eternal leader of the Nation of Islam, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has guided his beloved minister to be very successful and very effective. Yet throughout the minister's tremendous ministry that has crisscrossed America and engulfed the world, the minister's trail has frequently been dogged by the false charge of anti-Semitism, and it has ill-affected and interfered with his salvific work among our people that is widely known and acknowledged, that those who come to become students and followers of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan are transformed and elevated and raised to become productive men and women in American society and wherever they hear his message. So the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is guided now in this current atmosphere where we see the increasing weaponization of the false charge of anti-Semitism, that you now have a White House task force that has been assembled to deal with the charge of anti-Semitism, and it really infringes upon the free speech of all of those who claim to be American citizens and who think that they enjoy that right of freedom of speech. But whenever you are critical of members of the Jewish community, you may suffer being victimized by the false charge of anti-Semitism. So we thank Allah that he has guided our beloved minister to, at this critical time in history, to initiate this great fight.
Praise be to Allah.
Assalamu alaikum. On the point of what Brother Student Minister Demetric spoke, we have a book, and this is not just a commercial, but all of you who have not yet seen this book, it's on sale at a very small donation at the final call, and it is actually the complete document of the case that was filed. It's very important, if we're to be knowledgeable about this case, that we have a chance to read it and to understand it. Going to the point of why now, on the 28th of October, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan made a 17-minute, 35-second video where he gave a statement of this case, and I wanted to just read one paragraph that, to me, sums up the basis for this case, because as Brother Demetric has said, when you're dealing with a man of God and he's guiding you, then this is not a mere legal process. This is something else couched in legal form. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan states 2,000 years ago in the Roman Empire, the Jews of that day caused the Roman authorities to join with them to bring false charges against Jesus, as he was the last prophet to the Jews. 2,000 years later, some members of the Jewish community, the ADL and others, have met with White House officials and some members of the United States government to formulate a strategy that would enable them to make laws and policies that would allow them to arrest me or others who are falsely accused of being anti-Semitic. My teacher told me, take plenty, brother, and he told me that his teacher, Master Fard Muhammad, told him, you must take plenty. The minister goes on a little further. He says, when we saw that the ADL and others have joined with the U.S. government to produce a legal justification for punishment of anyone who is so charged as being a hater of the Jewish people and an anti-Semite, we decided to bring a lawsuit. For those of us who study the Holy Quran, we know there's a section in the Quran entitled, Jesus is cleared of what? False charges. So we must always see whatever we do in the spiritual framework and context out of which it emerges. And it is from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, the Messiah, that we were guided by him to bring this lawsuit on not only his behalf, but on behalf of the Nation of Islam.
Praise be to Allah. Can we give a round of applause to Brother Arf? So to lay the base for our discussion this afternoon, we want to kick it off with Brother Saad Alim. Brother Saad, can you please provide us an update on the filing status of the case?
I can. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, family. Before I do that, Brother Daniel, if you don't mind, before talking about the filing of the lawsuit, there were a team of individuals that went into a massive amount of research and drafting, and you don't see us all up here, so we want to acknowledge other members of the team who are in the room, that this document could not have been filed without them. Praise be to Allah. Praise be to Allah. So we have Brother Warren Muhammad right here in the first row. If you could stand up, Brother Warren. Praise be to Allah. Out of Houston, Texas. We have Brother Athil Muhammad out of Houston, Texas as well. We also have not an attorney, but definitely a paralegal, literally by certificate, Sister Amina Baina Muhammad, if she can stand up. Praise be to Allah. It's these, and Sister Attorney Yolanda Muhammad right here in the first row. This was the team, family, that for nearly a year, thank you all, for nearly a year, went into sacrificing time, energy, and everything that we had to get this lawsuit filed. So we want to recognize that. And we also want to recognize one other individual who has been commissioned by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan to facilitate and head the campaign to get this information out to the world, and that is Brother Leonard Farrakhan Muhammad. Let's give it up to the former Chief of Staff of the Nation of Islam, Brother Leonard Farrakhan Muhammad. Praise be to Allah. So very quickly, the lawsuit was filed, as was mentioned, October 16th, on the 20th anniversary of the Million Man March. After we filed the lawsuit, from a legal perspective, we had an opportunity to amend it, and we filed a first amended complaint to strengthen it based on some things that we saw after we filed it. And once we filed that amended complaint, the defendants, Simon Wiesenthal Center and the Anti-Defamation League, they filed a motion to dismiss. Now, just for everyone to know, the filing of that motion was as regular as the sun rising in the morning. We expected it. And if they didn't file it, they probably could have been charged with legal malpractice by their clients. So we fully expected them to file it. Once they filed that motion to dismiss, the very next day, the judge issued an order and said to us, either you can respond to their motion now, and we potentially have a hearing, but you may not get another chance to amend the complaint, or you can amend the complaint right now. And so, since they filed their motion, we got a chance to see where they were attacking the complaint that was on file. And so we chose to file a second amended complaint. So the first complaint was 76 pages, the second one was 90 pages, and since we went after it and wanted to close every potential loophole that might have existed for them to have a standing to file a motion, we ended up filing 150 pages, including the table of contents and cover page, on January the 2nd. Was it the 5th? January the 5th. So where it stands right now is they filed another motion for that second amended complaint. We filed a response, and they filed a reply. They get the last word on their motion. And so as it stands right now, we're just waiting for the judge to either grant a hearing on the matter where we would go to court and argue the nuances of our filings, or the judge can make a ruling right now and decide on the pleading. So we will keep you all updated as things happen, as the case unfolds. But there's one thing, if you don't mind, Brother Daniel, I'd like to say on the why now part. If you all saw, and it's definitely in the complaint, this past May, the President of the United States issued from his office, the White House, the national strategy to counter, the U.S. national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. After that was filed, the Anti-Defamation League went on their website to take credit for having the White House implement that national strategy. And that national strategy is to go throughout different departments throughout the government of the United States. And so now the Anti-Defamation League, who calls members of the Nation of Islam and the Nation of Islam the most notorious anti-Semites in America, and their policy has now just been adopted by the White House of the United States, what makes any of us think that we are not in the crosshairs of this national policy as they seek to ramp it up through the different departments of the government? So to that extent, family, just know that this is not academic for us. It might be academic for some other people, but for us, our livelihoods matter, our families matter, our liberty matters on how this lawsuit plays out. And so please stay tuned and be engaged. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Next, we want to swing over to Brother Attorney Abdul Arif Muhammad. Can you please share with us the history of the case and also how Minister Farrakhan has called for several times a dialogue with that community?
Thank you, Brother Daniel. I love sharing with you the minister's words because he has a way and gifted with, in a few short ways, giving you the essence of a thing. And so I'll start off as it relates to the background, again going to his statement of October the 28th, which is already up on YouTube, again 17 minutes and 35 seconds, and it's also in the book that we've published. He says, for nearly 40 years, we have withstood the awful charges that have come against me and those who are in the Nation of Islam under the leadership of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and myself. We have borne a lot in these last 40 years in the absence of our great leader and teacher, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and Elijah Muhammad, prepared me to receive the insults, the snares, being evil spoken of, and my and our reputation being scarred and bruised by the false charge of anti-Semitism by the Anti-Defamation League. And with their influence over the media, their false charges have been spread throughout the earth. All over the world, I and we have been hated, and I and we are hated the same today. I have been denied entrance into several countries and have been labeled as persona non grata. I'm presently being called the godfather of hate, and I'm being called one of the leading anti-Semites in America. Myself and my family and those who follow the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad under my leadership have suffered and been scapegoated and have lost positions in media, lost positions in business because of the vileness of the charge, even though we are saying that which is absolutely the truth. In the holy, all praises due to Allah. In the Holy Quran it reads, and mix not up truth with falsehood, nor hide the truth while you know. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad told us and taught us that hiding the truth leads to all kinds of mischief making and vile behavior, hatred, and even death. So we thought it is now time for us to legally respond to these false charges. Now, brothers and sisters, very quickly, the origin of this goes back to late 1983 when Reverend Jackson, or the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, pardon me, was invited to speak at the March on Washington. I believe it was the 20th anniversary. And he spoke for 6 minutes and was hailed really as having the greatest message of all of the leaders. At that event, Reverend Jackson mentioned to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan that he wanted and was considering running for president and was asking if the minister and the nation would help. The minister said he would go back and talk with his council and laborers. He did so, and the agreement was to help Reverend Jackson. Reverend Jackson was attacked, first over an incident with a journalist named Milton Coleman, where he was caught, as they call it, on a hot mic, allegedly saying Town, and they went after him. The minister attempted to defend him. Then they put a full-page ad in the paper with Reverend Jackson hugging Yasser Arafat, the leader of the PLO, and basically took out a full-page ad saying, "Ruin Jesse, ruin." They were threatening his life. They were firebombing several of his campaign offices, leaving dead animals there. I want you to understand the vileness and violence that was going on in that time. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan on a Saturday held a rally and defended Reverend Jackson and said to the Jewish persons who published this article, "Why don't you sit down and meet with Reverend Jackson? Let's talk intelligently about what is going on. Don't threaten to kill this man, because in the name of Allah, if you did kill him, it would be the last one that you would kill." So he was letting them know that God was backing him. Well, 2 days later, the then Anti-Defamation League national director, his name was Nathan Perlmutter, thank you. And he called the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan the new black Hitler. Now, when you read the complaint, you'll see the minister's actual words. Never did he say anything against Jewish people in any negative way other than to actually say, meet with us. You're a suffering people, we're suffering people. Let's have intelligent dialogue, but don't hurt our brother because he's our champion. Right behind that later on in the day, then Nat Hentoff, a journalist for the Village Voice, did a radio show and as well called the minister a new black Hitler. Now let me just lay on this for just a minute. Think about this, calling a black man the new black Hitler. Now bear this in mind. We all know what the history of what Hitler is alleged to have done and did do in Germany. But when you examine it being leveled against a black man, and bear in mind the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan had just been up a little better than 7 years, where he was traveling around the country and he was not taking interviews with the media during the whole 7-year period that he was rebuilding the nation, going into cities. But Reverend Jackson asked him to come out into the public. Well, once this occurred, you got to ask yourself, why would they call him such a thing? Because even then they saw, according to what's written in Message to the Black Man, see, they knew their civilization was to be judged and that a man would be born who would bring an end to the civilization of the Jews. According to the scriptures of Jesus, they even saw it then, so they went at him frontal attack. And of course, we don't have no one who's going to back down. Our minister is no punk. When you attack him, he's coming right to you. And so the fight was on, and it is waged on from that time until now. That is the origin and the history. Secondly, there's this constant lie about calling Jews these bad names, when the fact of the matter is the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has said over and over again, his focus is on the satanic Jew. Let me be very clear. The Quran makes it clear that there are those Jews who wrote a book with their own hand and claimed it was from Allah, and it was not. We're talking about the Talmudic Jew. He's referring to those satanic Jews, not those Jews who follow the Torah and who's trying to follow the law of Moses. So we're very clear about that. So don't allow yourself to be duped. And so they have tried this lie. And so he has made it clear over and over again where he stands. But you're not dealing with a people that are concerned with truth. They are high in the science of technology, and they have the power. The more they say it and repeat the lie, and repeat the lie, and repeat the lie, use their media power, use their other political influence, then you'll think what they're saying is true. So that is some of the background of this case that we have been fighting from then to now. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the injury that they have caused the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and us who follow him, because it's not just him, it's also about us because we follow him.
Praise be to Allah. Thank you for that. Brother Demetric Muhammad, can you outline for us the steps involved in being falsely charging a group or person with the label of anti-Semitism?
Well, I'm going to be inspired by my big brother Arif and share some of the profound words in response to such a question offered by Allah's servant, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and this excellent resource that is also available from the final call entitled Revealing the Truth and Exposing the Synagogue of Satan, a defense against the false charge of anti-Semitism. And I certainly would encourage everyone in this audience to make sure you have a copy of it, and be aware of the arguments that we are making. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan says this originally as a part of part number 22 of his monumental series entitled The Time and What Must Be Done. The minister says the following: how does one go from engaging in free speech that we assume is protected by the First Amendment of the Constitution to find oneself facing possible criminal penalties? How does such a wicked claim of anti-Semitism move the accused from speaking or writing the truth and then to legal jeopardy? What is the legal mechanism by which these attack dogs of the synagogue of Satan activate the governmental apparatus to seek out, punish, and destroy those that are labeled as anti-Semites or a hate group, and destroy their right to free speech in the process? We want to look at the criminal effect of being labeled, quote, anti-Semitic, and how these private Jewish organizations who do the labeling, like the Anti-Defamation League and the Southern Poverty Law Center, manipulate the government law enforcement agencies like the FBI and the IRS to target and harass those who are so labeled, and then how they work to affect their scheming with the disproportionate number of members of the Jewish community in the United States court system as DAs or district attorneys or federal and state prosecutors and judges, where these cases will ultimately be tried. It begins with anyone who holds a controversial view and speaks or writes about it in public. Controversial means, quote, contrary to the popular version of the truth, end quote. Instead of engaging in honest and open public dialogue and debate about the issue that the person raises, as is called for and encouraged by the United States Constitution, private interest groups start with the labeling, quote, he's a hate teacher with a hateful message, end quote. And then the group he belongs to, if they don't repudiate the spokesperson fast enough, they get called a hate group that promotes intolerance. And they don't have to prove it, they just have to say it over and over again. Then the drum beats get amplified by their brethren who control the media. And if that person does not apologize quick enough after that, they start to pick away at his supporters and those who would defend that person. If they are not strong enough to stand up to the slander, they begin to fall away and distance themselves. And some may even start repudiating and apologizing for their former friend and ally. Still, if they refuse to bow down, they connect certain inflammatory terms that are intended to generate real hatred and even retribution against the person who is speaking these controversial points. They start with, quote, he hates, he's intolerant, and that escalates to he's threatening, and he incites hatred in others. And then the word violence gets thrown in, and then hate crimes are mentioned, and ultimately you hear the words, quote, domestic terrorism. This is all calculated to get the public to put so much pressure on that individual that they and their supporters relent, apologize, and retreat.
Praise be to Allah. Can we give a round of applause to Brother Student Minister Demetric? We're going to bring our sister into the conversation, Sister Judge Nichelle. Yes, Brother Demetric just excellently articulated the last 8 steps of how they use that charge of anti-Semitism falsely. Could you give us some history of how the minister, the nation, and other leaders are accused because of their controversial views?
Yes, sir. Assalamu alaikum, family. The first thing I want to say is that as I sit here before you, brothers and sisters and friends in the room, I happen to be a judge. And when I took my oath to be a judge, I agreed to be fair and impartial and not base my decisions on race, creed, or color. And indeed, what my leader, teacher, and guide, the Messiah in our midst, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, says is, we treat people the way we want to be treated. I would never walk into a courtroom and decide against a person because of nature of their religion or faith. I've been a judge for approximately 8 years. I've served with distinction where I serve, and everyone, including Jewish people, Indian people, white, black, Spanish, reveal that they have been treated with the utmost respect, justice, and equality when they come into my courtroom. In fact, I would say to you, everyone I just mentioned, by faith or by who they are, always look for, well, where's the judge? Where's Judge Johnson, as I'm known? Because they know I'm fair. So the branding of a group, and I'm a proud member of the Nation of Islam since 1997. I have 4 daughters born and raised in the Nation of Islam. And my husband happens to be a minister, student minister in the Nation of Islam. And we are revered and respected by all people that we encounter, including me, as I said, as a judge. They rather have me as the judge. They always look for me because they know they're going to be treated fairly. So with that said, I'm a true testament as to why a label like this is hurtful, and it's just not true. So I believe the question had to do with controversy, and I wanted to just piggyback off of my brother Dimitri, on this word controversial, because the way we define it in our book that the minister gave us, right, means contrary to the popular version of the truth. And the reason why that's significant, because the popular version of the truth, we say, is really falsehood. So we are fighting truth with falsehood. Now, the other traditional definitions are giving rise or likely to give public disagreement, relating to or causing much discussion or argument. But this whole thing about the popular version of the truth is the one that resonates with us, because it is the falsehoods that are put out there. It is the minister trying to dispel those falsehoods, and now a lot of people are getting on board. So let me be clear. It is a wonderful time where our people are waking up to the popular version of the truth and the fact that it's falsehood. And so the minister has been doing that by trying to educate all of us about what's out there as the popular version being a falsehood against the truth. And we all know when that happens, as Brother Dimitri indicated, you be called, you're a hate teacher, you're intolerant, and then it also branches off into being a hate crime. Okay? And I'm going to pass the mic over to say that we've been doing that, the minister has been doing that, and it is clear that in this dispensation of time, looking at what's happening in Washington, what's happening in New York City in particular, there was some discussion about penalizing in a very police way, meaning arrest, the feeders of anti-Semitism. Well, who's a feeder of anti-Semitism? And if they call the minister an anti-Semitic insider, isn't an insider a feeder? So if the government and the powers that be in the various cities are saying we're going to start to punish the feeders of anti-Semitism, well, then it's very clear that at some point we're going to be criminals, correct? Including the judge. Because I'm a believer and I'm a member of the Nation of Islam, proud and steadfast.
Praise be to Allah. Thank you, Sister Judge Nichelle Muhammad. Praise be to Allah. And as previously noted by the minister, we filed this case on the anniversary of the Million Man March. The case includes 150 pages of content, plus exhibits detailing the history of the case. You can scan the QR code or go to NOI-ADL.org to get a copy of the case and exhibits. Now, our next question is to our brother attorney, Secretary, Student National Secretary, Brother Saad Ali Muhammad. Now, in their lecture, The Time and What Must Be Done, Part 22, Minister Farrakhan talks about the very real criminal effect of being labeled anti-Semitic. Would you please walk us through the reality of that?
Sure. I'll start with the words of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in the book, The Revealing the Truth and Exposing the Synagogue of Satan. He said in a lecture, "There are real anti-Semites in this country that hate the Jewish people, and there's nothing wrong with monitoring a real anti-Semitic hate group. But when you have that intention for me and the Nation of Islam, then we have to charge you and challenge you to prove your claim. You have a long history of lying on the Nation of Islam, and it is time that we throw down the gauntlet now and make you come before the American people and the world and prove your charge. That's exactly what the lawsuit is doing. See, on TV and on panel discussions in their conferences, they can say all kinds of things about the nation. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has asked for a showdown. He's asked to be brought before Congress. He's asked to be brought into courts. Never have he been taken up on that demand and request. But now, since we filed the lawsuit, they have to respond to what they have claimed all these years, and we'll see where it goes from there. But I want to follow up on a point that the judge just made, and I want to read this because, family, I'm not sure. I'm just trying to make this as plain as possible, and we are trying to make it as plain as possible. This is not academic. There is something in motion. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said decades ago that one day Islam will be outlawed in America. He said that. And he does not speak idle words. And so when we know that to be the case from history of what he said and start to look at what's happening now, it appears that it's unfolding right before our eyes. So let me read the quote from the governor first of the state of New York. And this is what the governor said in September of last year. As governor of the state with the largest Jewish population outside the state of Israel, I feel a solemn responsibility to protect and uplift New York's vibrant, diverse Jewish communities. How about uplift all the communities in New York? But that's not what she said. Then she went on to say, no one should ever have to fear for their safety while going to their place of work, going to school, or just walking the streets. It has always been my top priority to keep the people of New York safe, and we will continue taking action to fight anti-Semitism and use every tool at our disposal to eliminate hate and bias from our communities. Well, dear family, has the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan ever asked us to light some torches and go chanting against Jewish people in their communities? Has he ever asked us to go denigrate a synagogue or temple? Never. The Nation of Islam has zero history of any such activities. But somehow we get labeled with those who do advocate for the death of other people simply because of what they believe. Now let's listen to what the mayor of New York had to say. And he was real descriptive. He said, well, what we're doing, this is during a press conference, is what we did today, and that's why we're here, is coordination. And dealing with specifically anti-Semitism, it's not just a law enforcement issue. We need to stop the feeders of anti-Semitism. This is why we've partnered with the ADL and other organizations. We know we have to stop the feeder of hate in our cities. Well, they label the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan as the godfather of hate. So when the mayor says we have to stop the feeder of hate, that sounds like they're talking about the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Then he said, and then we must have a real law enforcement response. So talking about the criminalization, while it starts with a label, the mayor of New York said we have to have a law enforcement response to those who fit the category as being labeled as anti-Semitic or anti-Semitism based on someone else's definition. And in the lawsuit, we're very clear. And even though we use this phrase because that is what people understand today, we're clear that Jewish people are not the only Semitic people in history. Always be clear about that. Because Semitic people have a rich history. Semitic people have a very robust history. But it seems like one group wants to claim all the history for themselves by saying if you say something that's anti-Jewish, then you're anti-Semitic. So don't be duped into that understanding and being taken off. And we're taught in this same program, in the lessons that we had when we studied this book, when we start falling into other people's language and get taken off the language that we've been given, then it's easier to be taken off course. So that's where this is heading right now. And if we keep our eyes on the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, stay behind him, follow his lead and his guidance, then inshallah we'll be in the best place possible. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
All praise due to Allah. Beautiful words by Brother Saad. We're now going to swing over to Brother Attorney Michael Muhammad. Brother, could you talk about the constitutional infringement that takes place when they're falsely using the label of anti-Semitic?
Yes, sir. Thank you for your question, Brother Daniel. And assalamu alaikum to all of the believing family here this afternoon. You mentioned the constitutional issues, and it is indeed the Constitution that is at the root of this action. The Constitution is very, very pertinent and lays the base and the foundation of this action. You mentioned speech. Why don't we just relate for the believing body what the First Amendment of the United States Constitution provides for? The First Amendment reads, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble or to petition the government for a redress of grievances. What's at issue? The First Amendment is at issue. What part of the First Amendment? All of the First Amendment. Are we here today assembled? Should we allow anyone to prevent us or take steps to attempt to prevent us from assembling? Do you know that the ADL attempted to stop Savior's Day a year ago? Read it. It's in the complaint, wherein they attempted to have Ticketmaster not sell tickets to last year's Savior's Day. Not only interfering with our right to assemble one with another, not only interfering with our right to associate one with another, but attempting to interfere with the commerce of the United States. Yes, the First Amendment is at issue here. All of the First Amendment is at issue in this case. Not only is Minister Farrakhan doing this for himself and to protect himself, to fight for himself and to fight for us, but brothers and sisters, the constitutional rights of all of the American citizenry are in the crosshairs. Any person, as you heard Sister Judge Nichelle state, who holds a contrary view. In other words, we ignore the Constitution. We don't care what the Constitution says. You either believe as we believe, or we come after you. You either think like we think, or we come after you. You do as we say do, or we will in turn come after you. If that is the case, the Constitution has no real meaning. And I ask the question, is the Constitution real? All praise is due to Allah. Now, at one time, the Constitution didn't apply to us as black people, or they considered us in their Constitution as being less than a person, or less than a full person. But today they say we are citizens. Okay. Well, if we are citizens, is the Constitution real? Do we have a right to assemble? Do we have a right to associate with our brothers and sisters? Do we have a right to speak as we speak and to believe as we believe? There is no God but Allah who appeared to us in the person of Master Farrakhan Muhammad. That's what we believe. That's what we stand on. Thank you for your question, Brother Daniel.
Praise be to Allah. Thank you, Brother Michael. Sister Nichelle. Sister Judge Nichelle, how does the state law view others being labeled as anti-Semitic and the repercussions of being falsely labeled?
Thank you, Sister Sadia, for the question, ma'am. I'm speaking strictly on a legal level. Well, a study of the case law in New York State, there are a number of cases that have arguably likened the term anti-Semitic to saying someone is a racist, someone is a bigot, someone is a xenophobe. And in that instance, there's some cases that say, listen, it's just like being called a hater, a racist, or something like that. Then, in the state of New York, there are other cases that say, well, certain words, when they're used a certain way, though, can be something that could defame a person. You'd have to have those circumstances surrounding the word, some adjectives or some other words. It's about the context for there to be a determination that this word is actionable. So in the state of New York, that's basically where it lies with the word. But there are cases that have actually said that anti-Semitism in a certain way, used a certain way, can be defamatory. Sister Sadia, the second part of your question was, what happens when one is falsely labeled, in a way, anti-Semite, a word that's considered actionable by the courts to the extent that they've looked at the context and said, this is actionable? Well, the courts say this person's reputation has been tarnished. They have been looked upon with scorn, disdain, of bad character, and the reverberations of that have resulted in people losing jobs and being dismissed and not having opportunities extended to them, financial issues, as we know. And I think in this dispensation of time, those reverberations in negative items have gotten exponentially worse in terms of the social and economic backlash that comes from being labeled a word that the courts have determined is defamatory.
Thank you for that, my sister. Next, we're going to swing back to Brother Student Minister Arif, Attorney Arif. The case references the minister's speeches where he acknowledged the legitimacy of Judaism and his respect for the Jews who actually followed the Torah. Can you expound on that as outlined in the case?
First, in leading up to that, I want to go back to a point that has been resonating throughout Savior's Day. And the point resonating throughout Savior's Day is that God is a man. He's not a spook. Well, if God is not a spook, then is Satan a spook? Or is Satan also a man? And we must remember that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan informed us at the Criterion on July 4, 2020, that his mission was to what? Expose Satan and uncover Satan. So when you hear him say the satanic Jew, he knows exactly what he is talking about. And I want to remind us of something the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said to him, brother, you can't fathom the depths of Satan. Now, I'm saying this because if we don't think this is real, in 1985, when the minister was in a really, it was hot in those early days because it just started, and he spoke at Madison Square Garden, and listen to his words responding to the attacks against him being called the new black Hitler. The minister said, what do you think the aim and the purpose is of their using these kinds of words? The aim is to discredit a man by the use of false terms without any just basis. Their aim is to create an environment of hostility around that man that will keep the people from hearing what he has to say. It's designed to undercut any support that you might want to give me. It is to alienate people from me who might desire to help me. Then it is designed to isolate me and then, of course, destroy my influence among black people, and then ultimately the aim is to murder me. The ultimate aim. When you read the scripture, the Jews of those days, their aim was to crucify Jesus. It's no different today. Since that was history, we're now living in the time when that is the reality, and that is the aim of the satanic Jew, to crucify a good man who they see in their midst that God has raised. Now, I want to say to us, if you go to the complaint, it starts around paragraph 93, where to show you the heart of the minister, and we mentioned this earlier, the Quran talks about those Jews who believe in Allah in the last day, who believe in the Torah. So no one has ever disputed in any faith that there aren't good ones and that there aren't bad ones. There's good and bad in all. And so to play this as if he was categorizing all, he was very clear and he was very specific about what he meant when he was referring to the satanic Jew. He said this on September 14, 1985, it's page 94 of the complaint. I'm declaring to the world that you, the black people of America and the Western Hemisphere, are the lost, the rejected, the despised, the prodigal son, the lost sheep, God's people. You are the people of God. Now, this is not a problem of anti-Semitism. This is a problem of theological viewpoint. So the best thing you can do is tell the people, I'm a hater, I'm a bigot, I'm an anti-Semite. I just challenge the Jewish scholars. Show me the history of your suffering in Egypt for 400 years. I know you can't show it to me. That's all I'm saying. It's not violence. It's not anti-Semitism. It's a theological argument. Let us be real clear and not be deceived by the enemy who want to make us believe that our minister is something that he is not, and that we're something that we are not. We're not haters of anyone. Now, at the Million Man March, we already talked earlier about how the minister asked the Jewish groups to meet with Reverend Jackson in '84. They rebuffed it and then falsely called him the new black Hitler. At the Million Man March, he called again for a dialogue with the Jews or the Jewish groups that were having an issue. Of course, the ADL rejected. They don't want a meeting. They don't want a showdown because they cannot handle the truth. You know the movie. You can't handle the truth. You deal in deception and lies. And so as the Quran says, and nay, we hurl truth against what? Falsehood till it knocks out its brains. So we know this is where this is headed. I mentioned a little earlier about the injury. Many of us may not be aware that in the early days, in 1985, just as an example, when we were doing the power products, That money was deposited in a black bank. The powerful Jews went to the black bank and threatened the bank. And the bank called us back and said, can you please come and take your money out of our bank? Think about that now. A bank asking you to take out $5 million. Then we went to Johnson Company, who actually made those type of products, you know, Johnson Hair Care and all of that. They threatened them that if they attempted to make the products, that they would then get after them and all of their contractors, and they then capitulated. We got stories. They threatened all of the black colleges that if they let the minister come there or any of his representatives, they would present a problem. So guess what happened? They did what? Shut us down and would not let him speak on college campuses. Interestingly, broadcast media tried to black him out. Is that right? You know, recently Netflix wouldn't show his violin concert. I'm just showing you there have been replete of things. You're dealing with people of power. We're not just talking ethereal, ephemeral stuff here. We're talking about people who want power, domination, and control. And when you speak against that interest of theirs by exposing them as the liars and the Satan they are, then they will come against you to fight you. And that's where we are. So we better stand up and gird our loins and stand with the truth to defend our nation and defend the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan.
All praises are due to Allah. While we're on that same spiritual chord, we're going to swing over to Brother Dimitri. Brother Dimitri, could you tell us, where does the name Israel come from and what does it mean? And also, we know that the defendants in the case disagree with the theological perspective of the Nation of Islam when it comes to the children of Israel. Who are the real children of Israel?
That's a great question. Because oftentimes when we hear these kinds of social or political terms, anti-Semitism, etc., we think that this might be just germane to politics. But as Brother Arf was just reading the minister's sacrosanct words, he helps us to focus on the real root cause of this issue. This is a theological issue. When we began the work of the Nation of Islam's research group in 2010, it was as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was preparing to deliver a major message in the city of Atlanta, Georgia. And that message was entitled, "Who are the real children of Israel?" And the minister boldly stated in that message, if you haven't listened to it, go and pull it up and listen to it. If you've listened to it before, listen to it again. He says that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that Allah revealed to him that the black people of America are the real children of Israel.